Welcome back to my workshop, or if you're new to my channel then just welcome on general principles. This video is going to be my review of the Clarke planer thicknesser. I'll say at the outset that it hasn't been sponsored by Clarke or Machine Mart or anyone else, so what you're about to hear is just my own honest opinion on this machine, and it's as unbiased as I can make it. This is the CPT 1000, and the 1000 designation indicates that it's a 10-inch width capacity, and they do an 800 and a 600 model, and as you might expect those are 8-inch and 6-inch respectively. Now they all appear to be the same, they're the same layout, obviously they're made out of the same materials, they have the same controls. Only difference that I can discern between them is the size, the capacity, the power of the motor, presumably I think also the maximum cut depth, etc. But they all operate in the same way, so I think my comments on this one should be valid for any of the three if you're thinking about buying any of those in the range. Now over the last few weeks I've filmed lots of footage of this machine in use, showing you, how it operates and how you convert from planer mode to thicknesser mode and vice versa, and I've spent lots of time thinking about the pros and cons, what I like and don't like about it, and I've sort of filmed pieces to camera talking about all that. And got into a fair bit of depth, but actually, in light of my conclusion on this, I don't think it's worth me spending a lot of time editing that footage together. I don't think it's worth you spending a lot of time watching it. So I'm just going to quickly run through all of those points, and then we'll get to the main issue of this, the reasons that this is the second tool that I've had from them, and the reasons that this one, unfortunately, is going back, and I'm going to be requesting a refund on it. So things that I do like about it. It's an attractive price for the capacity. I think part of the reason, part of the way that they've kept costs down has contributed to the problems I've faced with it, but SIP do a similar capacity machine for similar money, I believe. I couldn't find all the specs like the power of the motor on that. Mostly the 8-inch machines and things in this sort of area of the market are a little bit cheaper, and I can't imagine that they'd be better quality. This looks like it should be a sweet spot. It was just under £500. It's £478.80 I think I paid, and that's not cheap. It's not a small amount of money, but in terms of planer thicknesser, it's not a lot either. It's certainly not the bottom end of the market. You would hope that it would be reasonable quality. It's quite light. This is only 28.5 kilos, which for a small workshop, when you need to move it around, that's quite handy. Again, the lightness partly contributed to by the use of aluminium instead of cast iron. We'll come back to that. That's not such a good thing. What else do I like about it? It's not quiet, because no tool of this nature is ever going to be quiet, but it's not as noisy as I expected it to be. It's probably on a par with a router. I would say it's almost certainly quieter than my handheld electric planer. Quality of finish that it leaves on the wood in terms of smoothness isn't too bad. It's a straight blade cutter, and it's only a 2-blade cutter head, so you can't expect it to be as good as a high-end helical, but I thought it was perfectly acceptable, to be honest, for this money. Certainly pretty good. I've got some footage of bits of wood I've planed through it. I can show you or put in. It's a bit hard to see how smooth they are on camera, but you can see there's not too much planer ripple, and they're quite good. Other things I like about it. Dust extraction, in my experience, hasn't been bad. I've got it close to my dust extractor here. You get a 63mm port on the dust hood that comes on the machine. I have got a 100mm hose with an adapter, and this adapter actually is in my table saw, so it's a little bit of a sloppy fit on this, and it's not the best setup I could achieve. But dust extraction hasn't been too bad. I can't really fault it, especially again for the price bracket. In my experience, it's been better in planer mode, where this dust hood is underneath the cutter block and gravity's helping you out. Not quite so good in thicknesser mode, where the extractor's got to take the chips up and out of there. But yeah, not bad. Dust extraction, not bad at all. In terms of setup, it was quick and easy to set up out of the box. All you need to do to kind of assemble the tool is fit the fence and get that square to the table, and there's a fine adjustment screw and locking nut that you can use to fine tune that. Fit this handle here, which, if you can see that, this handle which is the depth of cut adjustment for the thicknesser, and that's pretty much it. So it's ready to go. You know, it's quick and easy to set up. I did also wax the tables because that's always advisable, isn't it? And one last positive thing that I like, it's actually got cable tidy built into the back of the machine here, which is again handy if you're moving it around and putting it out of the way when it's not in use in a small workshop. Now, downsides, things I don't like. The fence is attached by a couple of hex head screws. There's a supplied Allen key that you get with the machine that does that. Those little screws are in a recess on the fence and they're slightly awkward to get at. If it was a one-time operation, I wouldn't perhaps even mention it, but you have to take the fence off to put it into thicknesser mode so you have clearance for this dust extraction hood, as I've got it set up now. Then reattach it when you want to use it as a planer, so you know that's a repeated operation and it is a bit of a faff. The clearance on this handle isn't actually enough. When you've got it in planer mode, in thicknesser mode, I've only got sort of average size hands for a bloke, I would say, and there's not quite enough room between the blade guard and that handle. A minor gripe. Other negatives before we get onto the main one. Ah yes, switching between modes generally and fitting this dust extraction hood. So you've got two of these little catches here, go into slots on the side of the table, and a captive bolt that you screw into a hole here, and you have to do it on the top for thicknesser mode, underneath inside the machine for planer mode, which is, you know, a little bit awkward, not too bad. The blade guard doesn't quite offer enough clearance for this to be easy to put on and off. There is a little stud here, a little screw stud, which no doubt is a safety feature to stop you raising the guard too high. I'd be tempted to remove that if I was keeping the tool and just, you know, make a mental note to keep the blade guard at a sensible height, but give myself more clearance for getting the dust guard on and off. One of my concerns about what might not be good on the machine is the power of the motor. It's a 1500 watt. I didn't really know if that was adequate or not. I mean, my handheld electric planer is 1050 watt, and that's only taking an 82-83 mil width of cut at maximum. This is 10 inches, 254 millimeters, albeit 2 mil max cut at depth, and the handheld planer I think does 4. But it hasn't seemed to be underpowered, it seemed to be okay, so that's kind of neutral. I'm not saying that's a downside, that's alright, and it seems to be on a par with its competitors. Another thing, which is perhaps a relatively minor gripe, but I'll mention it, the depth of cut adjustment on here for the thicknesser, it states that it does 3 millimeters travel on the table, up or down, per turn of the handle. So one complete circle of the handle raises or lowers the table 3 millimeters. Maximum depth of cut of the machine is 2 millimeters. It would be nice if those two things correlated, really. You could set the depth to the thickness of your board. If you wanted to use the maximum cutting depth, you could just make one turn and know that you're there. As it is, you have to judge that or use the scale on the side of the machine, and it makes taking small cuts a little bit harder. So if you want to just take a fraction of a millimetre, you're moving the handle a tiny little bit. You don't want too slow a ratio, because if you need to drop the table right down from the top, you don't want to be there all day turning it, but I can't see why they didn't match the maximum depth capacity of cutting with the amount that handle will move the table in one turn. That would just be something more convenient. So the main problem seems to be build quality and precision and the use of aluminium instead of cast iron. And that unfortunately is something that we can't really sort of get around, or that is such a problem that I'm going to have to return the tool. So I bought one of these. I tried the planer function on it briefly and it seemed to be pretty good. I was quite impressed with it. I tried the thicknesser function and it just wouldn't work at all. It wouldn't feed the wood through, even if you were trying to take the smallest possible fraction of a cut. It was hopeless. I phoned Clarke's parts and service line, described the problem and what I'd done in trying to resolve it. They said, that's a faulty unit, return it, get another one. No quibble, no messing around, which is good customer service. Okay, yeah, exchange it. So I changed that one for this one. This one, the thicknesser works fine. It's actually, if anything, better than the standalone thicknesser I had previously. It didn't have a planer function. But the planer function doesn't plane evenly. And I've spent a lot of time messing around getting the fence absolutely square. I cannot get it any better than it is, and it is square. I've checked the blade alignment and they are parallel, and I can't, again, get them any better than they are. But I've put a level across as a straight edge, and these tables, the in-feed and out-feed tables for the planer, are not perfectly flat and not perfectly coplanar, and there's no adjustment on them. And that's where this is going to be the real downfall of this machine, because if it's set up correctly when it leaves the factory and by the time it reaches your workshop, fine, then you should have no problems with it. But because there's no adjustment, if it's not set up spot on, you can't make it right. And if these tables are not flat, it just doesn't do the job properly. I'd underestimated the precision needed in such a tool. If it's just a situation where you're taking one or two passes of a piece of wood, you might not even notice. The wider the board is, the more noticeable it becomes in this case, because of how the tables are out of alignment. And that little incremental error multiplied up if you're taking multiple passes just becomes a real problem. You end up cutting a wedge. Of course you can't just turn the board round and plane it the other way to even it out, because there's no guarantee it's actually going to end up straight and flat, and mainly because then you'll be planing in the wrong direction for the grain half the time, so that's not practical. I'll show you an example. It's a bit subtle to see on camera perhaps, but this little block, which I just used for a test, you might be able to see one side is thicker than the other. It didn't start out that way. I've put it over the planer, I think 2 or 3 passes, maybe 3 or 4 light passes at cutting depth of 0.5 millimetre if that, and it's a wedge. So if you've got a wider board, it exacerbates the problem. If you're trying to plane some cupping or a concave surface out of the board and you need to take a bit more off, you need to take several passes, you're not going to end up with parallel faces or anywhere near. Okay, yes, you could put that back through the thicknesser and get those faces parallel, but you're losing extra material that you didn't need to. If you've got a defect on this side here that you need to plane down to, you're going to take way more off here than you need to in order to get to that. It's just not workable. It doesn't do the job properly, and therefore it's not really worth having in my view. So it's not been as noisy as I expected. The capacity is quite good. The dust extraction is surprisingly decent for a relatively budget tool. It's light, it's portable. Actually, for a 2 straight blade cutter block, it's leaving a perfectly reasonable finish on the wood. And the thicknesser function on this particular one, it was hopeless on the first, on this one it's good. But I'm still going to return it because it won't plane flat, and therefore it just isn't possible to do what I want to do with it. It doesn't perform its function properly. So would I recommend one of these tools? Well, in good conscience, no. I think unless you have very limited expectations of it, it's not really a good purchase. There are things I would have been prepared to compromise on for the fact that it's a cheaper tool. If the feed rate is a little bit slower than a high-end machine and it takes a little bit longer to thickness boards, fine. If the dust extraction wasn't even as good as it actually is, I would have said, okay, that's acceptable, it's a cheaper tool. The finish, if it was as it is or even slightly worse, and you just had to do a bit more sanding than you would with a higher end machine, again, that's a compromise I probably would have been willing to make for the price. But that lack of accuracy so that it won't plane flat and true is not an acceptable compromise. So first question, would I recommend one of these machines? Sadly, no. Second question, can you buy a reasonable planer thicknesser for 500 quid or less in the UK in 2025? No, but yes, I think is the answer. So I've come to the conclusion that if that's your budget, my advice to you would have to be look for a second-hand tool, and if you can find a decent second-hand tool in reasonable condition, then you probably can get a good machine for that money. You need a little bit of luck, you need to be patient enough to find, wait until something good comes up. You maybe need the skill to restore it to full efficiency, sort of thing. If you're looking to buy new, unfortunately I would say no. If they're all like this, you're going to be frustrated by it unless your expectations are very low. I'm now looking at either getting a second-hand machine or spending 3 times as much money or near enough to get a decent new machine. So, not the most positive conclusion, unfortunately, but at least we can say that if you were thinking about buying one of these and this has been useful, it may have saved you some time, money and hassle. You might be lucky, you might get a good one. I can't recommend it really, based on my experience. Right, quick update. It's been another few weeks since I filmed the last bit of the video you just watched. I took that Clarke machine back to Machine Mart the same day that I filmed that. Got a full refund with no quibbling or messing around. I think I said previously, the actual product hasn't been great in that experience, but the customer service has been good. So, fair play to them there. I then took my own advice and I did look online for a good second-hand machine. I found a few that were not that good in terms of spec. I found some that were just a really long way away and would cost me a lot of fuel to go and collect. I found a couple of reasonable options, but they needed 3-phase power supply. I didn't want to go down that route of changing things like that in the workshop. So I then took my other piece of advice and I spent a lot more money on a new machine of better quality. And I bought this Axminster Workshop. It's the 2260S, the S meaning it's a spiral cutter block. With delivery, bearing in mind it's palletised, it's a big heavy thing. I think the delivery charge alone is about 75 quid, so with that factored in, this is roughly 3 times the price of the Clarke machine. But in my view, it's more than 3 times the machine. I've been really impressed with it so far. You can see that the build quality is there. It's cast iron, it's not aluminium. It's a solid bit of kit. It performs really well. I'm well pleased with it. Now, I might do a follow-up video and do a bit of a review of this and share my thoughts on it. There is a channel on YouTube called Captain of My Shed, which I've got no affiliation with and never even corresponded with or spoken to the guy that runs that, but he has a video where he's reviewed this very make and model of planer thicknesser after a year of ownership. So that's worth a look if you're considering one of these. I thought it was quite useful. Yeah, really impressed with it, really pleased with this. And yes, it's bigger and bulkier, but I've just put it on some 18mm ply on some heavy duty casters. I can wheel it out of the way behind me here when it's not in use. It still works for a small workshop. Probably what I should have bought to begin with. I do know that you tend to get what you pay for and that cheap tools can be a bad bargain. This is nearly twice the price of my DeWalt table saw, so I kind of hoped to get away with spending less on that Clarke machine. It wasn't acceptable for me. This is great. So yeah, all's well that ends well. And I'll wrap up the video here. Now, I'm not going to do the stereotypical YouTuber thing and ask you to like and comment and subscribe and all that malarkey. I'm not intending to make a living out of YouTube. I don't think that's really feasible, and I'm not going to try and sell you anything. It is nice when people subscribe to the channel, you get that notification and you think, okay, they saw some value in it, it's kind of encouraging, but I'm not going to kind of ask people to do that. If you want to comment below the video your experiences of Clarke machines in order to help like-minded people, maybe let us know if you've had a really good one or a really bad one, fine. I'm not looking to feed the algorithm here, I really don't care. But yeah, if we can help one another out, that's the point, isn't it? Let's reclaim social media and make it social media, shall we? Rather than one big advertising platform. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so I'm going to stop.
I'll leave you with, rather than a sales pitch, what my dad always says when people visit him: mind how you go coming back.